Welcome back to the Nuggets of Gold podcast and YouTube channel. It has been quite a time since we've recorded, since we've been on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you guys are listening to us at. But it has been a while. It's been, I think the last time we recorded, Aiden, was right before the draft. I want to say a couple days before. Maybe we did one right after the draft as well, but that was in April. So we're recording. I think today is actually September 1st. Look at that. So it's about 3-4 months ago that we recorded. But we're going to talk a lot about the Niners today. Going to talk about this 53-man roster. And the plan for the show moving forward is to be doing one show a week, probably. I'm guessing we're going to try to shoot for Monday, just so we'll talk about the game right after it happens. Maybe if it's a Thursday night game, we'll record on Friday. Monday night game, we'll record on Tuesday. But we do plan to be, posting throughout the whole season, and also throughout the offseason. I'm hoping next year as well, because Aiden and I both, we like following the draft. Last year, fortunately, didn't get as much time to actually follow the draft, but I'm planning to really dive deep into it this year. So I'm looking forward to talking about that down the road. But no draft talk, nothing like that today, because we are going to be talking about a 49ers team that I think is going to be really, really good. We're going to be talking about the NFC, going to be talking about Trey Lance, this 53-man roster. And the NFC is weak. The 49ers are one of the best teams, and they have a guy who's never started like a season as the starter. Obviously, Trey Lance got some reps last year, a little bit up and down. That's how training camp has gone as well. But let's get into this 53-man roster, and we'll talk about Trey Lance after, and then we'll finally wrap it up with some NFC playoff predictions. But let's get into it. Aiden, what were kind of the biggest surprises about this 53-man roster? I know that there's two that I think are very obvious, that they're the ones that are going to stand out. But what did you think about this 53-man roster, and what do you think about some of the cuts, some of the options for keeping guys on this team?
I thought it was pretty interesting. Kyle kind of went against conventional wisdom, and there were some cuts that he made that I think people wanted to keep, like Jason Poe. Obviously, we're able to retain him on the practice squad. So Kyle, I guess, knew something a little bit different than some other people. But like you said, this is going to be a really really good Niners team. And the fact that I think we had three guys claimed right away after we got rid of them, kind of proves that this is going to be a really good team. If you're cutting three guys that are going onto active rosters, and I think the Bengals even picked one up, and that's a Super Bowl appearance team last year. I think that says a ton. Obviously, the Trey Sermon cut, like a day and a half after that 53-man first cut down, was interesting. And they have not done a very good job of drafting third and fourth round running backs. So that's something that surprises me, because Shanahan's been so good at finding people late. You would assume when he handpicks his guy, even when he paid all that money for Jerick McKinnon, like, it didn't really work out. So it's interesting that the Shanahans seem to have made a little bit of a deal with the devil to only be able to pick up undrafted and late round guys. But unfortunate for Sermon. It's possible that he still is retained on the practice squad. I assume somebody's going to put in a claim for him, but wish him the best. And unfortunate that he wasn't able to make this team, but it created an opportunity for Jordan Mason, who is sort of the star of the preseason. That guy runs hard. And I think he's going to be kind of an underrated piece of this running back room moving forward. Kind of take over that Jeff Wilson role potentially as he gets up there in age. But like Matt said, this is going to be a really really good team. There were a couple surprising cuts that we'll jump into a little bit more. But I mean, I'm just so excited for this season. Obviously, the Jimmy stuff we're going to dive into when we talk about Trey. Feel so sorry for the lady who's still drawing him every single day, which is quite unfortunate. But I have warmed up to the move a little bit. I didn't like it when it first popped out, but I can understand the thought process a little bit better now.
Yeah, and I'll start with Jimmy a little bit, because I was like the same thing that you just said. It happened, and I was like, "What? We're keeping Jimmy? Why? Like, isn't the whole point that you're trying to move on? You're trying to have your quarterback be the guy." And I think that was everyone's initial reaction. Why would they keep? Why would they keep Jimmy if Trey's going to be the starter and they're sure of Trey? But then you look into it a little bit deeper, and I think it makes a lot more sense after like the initial reactions, because one, we know that Jimmy Garoppolo is hurt and they couldn't really trade him earlier in the offseason. Which definitely was a big blow to the Niners' offseason plans. You didn't have a lot of extra money to work with. Now that money will roll over. I actually think the Niners are like one of the top teams in cap now, which is kind of weird because they have like one of the best rosters in the league. But you look and you go, okay, so they're spending like maybe an extra, I think it was like $3 million based on what Jimmy was going to get paid if they cut him. They were not going to trade him. The only team that wanted to trade for him apparently was the Seahawks. So if they were going to cut him, and then the Seahawks were going to pick him up and make a significant upgrade to their quarterback room for 2 games that you're playing this year, or you could keep Jimmy for like $3 or $4 million more as your backup and have the best backup in the NFL with a super raw young quarterback that's 22 years old in Trey Lance. And I don't think it's about Lance like not being good, but he's also a guy that we don't know how injury prone he is. We haven't seen him in a lot of games. We've seen him run the ball a lot. We've seen him take some big time shots. But you look and you go, okay, so if you would have cut him, the Seahawks would have picked him up, and then you would have saved $3 million. I would probably rather have the guy have the best backup quarterback in the league and not let my division rival make a significant upgrade in the quarterback room. You also keep looking at it and you go, so they have a no trade clause with Jimmy. So they're obviously like, they're going to work together if they are going to trade him. If a quarterback goes down in week 1 or 2, the Niners could easily trade Jimmy Garoppolo for like a 3rd round pick. If Jimmy Garoppolo, I was going to say the comp pick as well.
Yes, I think the comp pick is a 3rd. I think they start at a 1st or 2nd round pick, and if they don't like the offer, they'll just take a 3rd at the end of the year. I think that was a really, really good point. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, because I mean, you look at the comp pick and you look at how that would work out, and it is like kind of odd just because you see a guy he's a backup. No one wanted to pick him up, right? But then let's look at some of these starting quarterbacks around the NFL. Let's look at some of the ages of these quarterbacks around the NFL. Jimmy's going to have a market. He's going to have a market if he hits free agency next year, or I should say when he hits free agency next year, because there's teams that are going to need to pick guys up. Now, the draft wise, there are some better quarterbacks than this past season. That's why I think it was a little bit weird that we didn't see Jimmy Garoppolo get moved, just because like the best guy was Kenny Pickett, and he's not starting over Mitchell Trubisky to start the year. Like that gives you a pretty obvious thing. Like, okay, the quarterback class was not very good. But yeah, I mean, you look at the comp pick, you look at what Jimmy's made, you look at he's probably going to get signed to start a season. Yeah, they're going to get a decent comp pick. So that's another aspect of it. You're going to cut him and give up nothing and not get a pick, not get I'll say a 2nd to 4th rounder, just to be like conservative with that estimate. That's a decent pick. That's a decent pick that you'd be losing. So I think that Jimmy staying makes a lot more sense than I initially thought. And I think it's probably a lot safer too for the season. If Trey's to go down, you're going to rely on Sudfeld to take you. Like, what's the difference with Jimmy? We just saw Jimmy take this team 2 of the last 3 years when he was healthy both times. I mean, not even healthy last year, but he was playing, right? He took them to the Super Bowl and a championship game. Did he play good in the playoffs? No. But you saw that this team was still able to rally around him and go that far. So I think as like a backup option, that's phenomenal. And then you look at all the other aspects of it of you not having to play him 2 times this year. Instead, you're going to be playing Geno Smith or Drew Lock. That's way different. That is way, way, way different. So I do think it makes a lot more sense. You brought up Trey Sermon as well. I mean, Trey Sermon. I mean, you were talking about the running backs in the Kyle Shanahan era, dude. So Kyle and the Niners paid Jet McKinnon, Tevin Coleman. Underwhelmed. Then they drafted Joe Williams, Trey Sermon, bust 3rd and 4th round. Like, I mean, they are bust because like I know usually busts are 1st rounders, but like you didn't get anything out of them. You basically got Trey Sermon scoring a touchdown against the Packers on Sunday Night Football on a nice little cut, and that was about all of Trey Sermon's impact in San Francisco, unfortunately. But this was a surprising one just because he was a 3rd rounder last year. But it kind of goes to show how good the 49ers are at getting running backs late. And it also makes you a little bit concerned about Davis Price, because it's like, dude, every time you guys draft a running back early, he hasn't been good. And then it almost feels like the undrafted dude, Jordan Mason, might be better than Davis Price. Like, it's still early, of course, but like some of the hype is kind of showing that, where you got Mitchell, you got Jeff Wilson. Like 3 of the guys were basically, I don't remember if Wilson was drafted. I believe he was undrafted, but that would be 3 of the guys were undrafted. Like, or I guess Mitchell was a 6th rounder, like late to undrafted, right? So that one's just a big blow just when you look at it because it's like, and I'm sure if we go back and look in that draft, there's probably like 5 guys picked like right after him that are like complete studs where it's like, oh, like this is bad. But I think like I always liked the talent of Trey Sermon. It just seemed like it wasn't really a fit for this squad. Like I think that they had a great idea for how they're going to use him. But Trey Sermon kind of had some off the field issues, not in terms of like discipline stuff, but in terms of just like missed assignments, not knowing the playbook, stuff like that. I mean, he failed out of school because of grades. So like I think it was more about that. And we've heard players talk about how like demanding it is from a mental standpoint to be in Kyle's offense. And I don't know if he could really hang with that. And I think I mean, you heard Kyle talk about him. They asked Kyle after one of the preseason games, like, how'd he look? He's like, well, you saw the production and like completely ripped him. So I think that Kyle was really disappointed in how Trey Sermon looked. I do wish him the best of luck. I was really stoked when they took him just because he's a very talented running back. But it just didn't work out. And I think that we could kind of all see the writing on the wall as training camp was going on. Like, hey, Trey Sermon might get cut. And then he made the 53-man. You're like, oh, look, he made it. And then they go and they scoop the Browns guard and basically went that route instead, which does make a lot of sense. So still looking at this 53-man roster, what would you say are the 2 biggest strengths of the roster and the 2 biggest weaknesses of the roster?
2 biggest strengths. We've talked about it. I think quarterback is one. Went from having. I mean, I think Jimmy is a capable starter, but I think he's a average starter at best. I think he is a starting quarterback in this league, but he's not a whole lot better than 15 to 20. So you have him as your backup, makes that quarterback room substantially better. I love the running backs, but honestly, corner. I think corner went from probably the worst spot on this team last year to if Verrett comes back, you have a 3-headed monster. And some like Demo Lenore looked really good in those last 2 games of the preseason from what I've read. And even though Ambry Thomas has taken a bit of a step back this year, he was so good during the stretch last year that if he gets the confidence back, I think he could be capable. And Samuel Womack was the star of the first preseason game, could be in line to be the starting nickel. I think that they completely shifted the outlook of that room from this time last year when we were like, ugh, how are we looking at corner to now? I think that that's one of the deepest units, not just on this team, but probably in the entire NFC and the whole league. You have some very capable guys that you can throw out there, which I think could be deadly with how good this pass rush is going to be. And it's crazy that I just chose the corners over the D line, but we only ended up keeping 9. There was some projections that we could keep 11. The fact that we were able to keep a couple of those guys that I think are 53-man guys, like Kimoko Trey, keep him on the practice squad. Like that unit is so good. But I more want to focus on how much they improved that cornerback room from this time last year, and that's honestly been one of the most impressive things that this front office has done in their time there, given how much of a weakness it was last year. In terms of weaknesses, offensive line, if Trent Williams goes down, obviously I think he's better than the 14th best player in the NFL. I think he's a top 5 player. Obviously, whenever you're going to lose a top 5 player, your unit's going to go down. But if Trent Williams goes down, he makes everybody around him so much better. That becomes a bottom tier offensive line. Aaron Banks hasn't started a game ever. You lose Lakin. Jake Brendel is a major question mark at center, and center is asked to do a lot in Shanahan's scheme. Apparently, the right guard situation has sort of figured itself out with Burford, and I like that Brunskill is kind of that do it all first guy off the bench, but like that's not confirmed good. So if Trent goes down, like that offensive line becomes extremely questionable. And I think you could say the same thing about wide receiver. We both think Ayuk is going to have a crazy year. I assume he had such a good training camp and seems to have taken another step. But we haven't seen it for a full year. And Debo always is missing games with injuries. Juwan Jennings really underwhelmed this training camp, but Danny Gray's been good. Um, I would just say those are the main two weaknesses I see, just because of one major injury. Obviously, those are some of your best players, but it kind of cripples the wide receiver room if Debo or Ayuk goes down, because that's just less for Lance to really deal with, and as an inexperienced quarterback, that's probably not the best case scenario. So, I mean, obviously, never want to, I guess, approach it as if this guy goes down, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. But I think that also speaks to how good the Niners have filled out this roster. I don't see any glaring holes, but those are the main two that I see.
Yeah, and I'll start with, some of the strengths, and I'll get into some of the weaknesses, pretty much the same weaknesses that you're bringing up. There's one other that I'll bring up as well. But in terms of the strengths, you talked about the cornerback room. Last year, Dre Kirkpatrick and Josh Norman were starting games. This year, you're starting to, and I get E-Man was there last year, but E-Man looks like he's just got better and better every single year. Where, dude, I believe he's a free agent after this season. He's going to get paid. He is a good corner. Like, I remember in 2019 when he came onto the scene, it was like, hey, this guy's pretty solid. Like, he would be like a perfect cornerback for. That's what my thought was. No, dude, he is a legit starting corner in the NFL. He has really turned on and become a great player. Mooney Ward, Travarius Ward, however, I believe he changed his name. I liked his film a lot. Last year was his best season, so he's coming off his best year. Very, very talented player. And then the guy in the nickel, Samuel Womack, he was, like the preseason star, I guess you could say. But that would probably be the biggest question mark, is that nickel spot. But you brought up, if Jason Verrett is healthy, dude, they can run man way more than they've ever run man. And if you guys remember that 2020 season, in the back half of the year where we got to see good Akello, because that was always the thing, which Akello are you going to see, good Akello or bad Akello? But when Akello was balling at the end of that 2020 year, he and Jason Verrett were really good in man. Like, that was one of the best parts of the defense, is that they could just man up with anyone. They were manning up with Hopkins late in the year. They had a couple really, really big performances. So those guys were really good in terms of man coverage. And D'Amico was able to, adjust the defense a lot last year too, where they were running more man. So I find it really interesting how much better this cornerback room is this season compared to last year, because last year it was very obviously the problem. The Niners defense was still really good, but they had, I mean, you remember those first like 8 weeks of the year when it felt like the Niners were not going to be a playoff team, and it felt like, okay, what can we blame? Maybe we could blame Jimmy Garoppolo a little bit, but it was more like, no, the Niners corners are the worst corners in the league. This is the worst DB room, like, and it just felt so bad. This year doesn't feel like that at all. So big upgrades there. You brought up D-line as well as a strength. D-line's always going to be this team's strength. I mean, the amount of capital that they've been putting into it. Drake Jackson as a pick, I haven't talked about it too much, but Drake Jackson is going to be an absolute monster this year. He should finish the season with 8 sacks. That's what my take is. I think I know that's kind of a bold statement to make. He's going to go one-on-one on third down, probably as much as any depth defensive lineman there is in the league. Like, he's going to be a pass rushing specialist, and he is going to terrorize opposing offensive lines. Whoever's at that left or right tackle spot, and wherever he's lined up on third down, it's going to be scary for that guy, because it's going to be a one-on-one matchup every time when you look at the Niners D line. And then you look at some of the other guys. Dude, the last guy on the depth chart right now is Kerry Hyder. When he was last on the 49ers, he led the team in sacks, and he can play both inside and outside. You have Eric Armstead that can play both inside and outside. Javon Kinlaw's looked really good. People have been really excited about him, and he was probably the guy that I would red flag the most in terms of like a starter, and everything's been really positive from him. So you have your starters are really good. You have 5 guys, I think, that are really legit defensive linemen. And then you have a bunch of these backups that we know that Chris Kasurek is going to just turn into like really solid difference makers. Hassan Ridgeway was a solid pickup. Kevin Givens has been pretty solid for the Niners as well. Like, there's just so many guys where it's like, yeah, we just know that everyone's going to produce. We saw that last year. Charles Omenihu looked really good. Jordan Willis looked really good. Had, maybe the biggest play of the 49ers season. So all these guys are going to be impact players, and the Niners have 5 guys that I feel super confident as like starting caliber players there. And then I think you brought up quarterback. I think you could bring up running back as well, just as like similar to corner, where like last year, early on in the year, there was like no one at running back, and that's why Debo ended up kind of taking on that role because it was just Elijah Mitchell for quite some time last year. You do have a lot more depth in the running back room. Mason, Prince, Davis Prince, those guys like they're third and fourth string backs, and you got Jeff Wilson and Elijah Mitchell at 1 and 2. So pretty deep running back room. We know that's been an emphasis for Kyle Shanahan teams just because a lot of those guys do go down. Running backs just get hurt a lot. So yeah, I think those are the biggest strengths of this team. You brought up the weakness. I'll talk about wide receiver first because I don't really think it's a weakness in terms of the starters or anything. But in terms of depth, you only kept 5 wide receivers, which I think is more of a sign of you're going to want to run the football a lot this season. They're planning to use a lot more heavy personnel and kind of approach it a little bit differently than last season looked. But in terms of wideouts, I think Danny Gray is super intriguing just because we've seen Debo Samuel hit. We've seen Brandon Ayuk hit. And I know Brandon Ayuk was a first rounder, but it's kind of like that second group of wideouts. Danny Gray was maybe like a third group of wideout, but he looked really good. Like he looked really good when he was on the field. He can absolutely fly. So it's a little bit different dynamic than what we've seen, and especially what we've seen of that third wide receiver role with Jawan Jennings and Kendrick Bourne in the past, where they're more possession receivers over the middle. They're taking more shots this year, and Danny Gray is going to be on the field a lot. So I'm very intrigued by him. The biggest weakness on this team, I don't really think it's a debate. I think it's the offensive line, and more specifically the interior offensive line. You are banking on 3 guys to basically like become your starters, to become legit players. Aaron Banks, I mean, everything's been positive this year, but last year's reports still kind of have me a little bit scared because it was like, hey, this guy looks horrible. This guy looks like completely overmatched. Now, we see that a lot with NFL offensive linemen in that first season, in that rookie year. So if he's taking a big step, that will be huge. But then we got Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, and I know that there's been a lot of like positive stuff coming from those guys, but I want to see it a little bit first against, because if you guys remember, we do play Aaron Donald twice a year. So that's terrifying. That's absolutely terrifying. No other way to put it. So a couple injuries, and it could look like a lot more scary for this offensive line. But I don't know, man. That's like the biggest kind of concern I have. Safety. Safety is also a room. Tarvarius Moore is going to be starting. Talanoa Hufanga is going to be starting. I like both those guys. That's a significant downgrade from having Jimmy Ward and Kwaski Tart last year. And I don't think Kwaski Tart is like a crazy player. He got cut. But that's like a big time downgrade. So Jimmy Ward's health is going to be really important here. I do like Odom a lot. I thought Odom was potentially going to start at strong, but that's a little sus too. So the back end is a little bit scary. Now, the good thing is we already brought up the cornerback room as a strength. So very positives there. But I think those are probably my 2 biggest weaknesses. We didn't really talk about linebackers. Didn't really talk about, I guess that's kind of the only thing we didn't talk about. I mean, linebackers pretty obvious. You got your 3 guys there. You got a couple depth pieces, but you're very confident in those 3 guys. But yeah, I think that's probably all I have on the 53 man. Just looking at it from like kind of preseason prediction standpoint, post roster cuts. But anything else you wanna talk about on the 53 man?
I just want to give a quick shout out to Aaron Banks and Javon Kinlaw. Those are guys who caught a ton of flack last year and this offseason, but everything coming out of camp is that those 2 guys had tremendous off seasons. And I feel really confident about Aaron Banks going into this year, given how easily the Niners let Lakin walk. I think that that's something that shows a lot of confidence in him. And you've seen people talk about, I think Trent had a quote where he was like, Aaron Banks completely transformed his body, lot lighter on his feet. And when he was drafted, people were surprised because he doesn't fit that stereotypical Kyle Shanahan zone run mold. He was much too big, but he's slimmed down substantially. He's moving a lot better. He's light on his feet. And next to Trent Williams, I think that makes your job a little bit easier. He's back to the left guard position. People were kind of penciling him in last year as that right guard, but he played left guard primarily in college. So he's back to his natural spot. I feel really good about him. And Kinlaw obviously had some controversy this off season, but ever since that, he's really locked it down. I haven't really seen anything negative about him since. And the reports are he's just a really solid defensive lineman. that I think is just going to eat up double teams in the middle. He's so big, and I think he's going to make the entire D line's life much easier, specifically Eric Armstead, because when you have two capable guys on the inside, it's just so hard for those interior offensive linemen to deal with them. And we talked about a little bit before the show. Chris Kasarik is so creative with his stunts and stuff like that. I think Kinlaw is going to have a really good year. He looked really good during the preseason as well. That's just what I wanted to highlight. Two guys who caught a lot of negativity last year, who I think are going to be very important pieces of this team this year, and over the next few years.
I like that you bring those guys up because both of them, even if they look really good, are probably not going to get the credit throughout the duration of the season. If Aaron Banks is a stud, that is so massive for the Niners because they can just go, we're just going to run the ball to the left all the time. And you're not going to be able to stop it. You can know we're going to run the ball to the left. If he's good and you have Trent Williams there, we saw that last year with Lakin. So I think that's a huge one. And like you were saying, I think another guy to kind of bring up on the O-line too, and like a similar, like getting like a lot of hype and a lot of praise from Trent Williams is Burford. Because Burford was the guy, right? It's not Brendel. It was Burford that worked with Trent in the offseason. Yeah, you saw the move.
Yeah.
The Trent Williams move where he like kind of pulls the guys forward and then just throws them on the ground. We saw Burford do that in preseason. So that was a little bit exciting. I was pretty hyped when I saw that just because the classic Trent Williams move right there. So that's another guy too. But let's say Aaron Banks is amazing. Niner fans will know. The rest of the NFL is not going to know. The rest of the NFL is not going to think about, heading into the season, their interior offensive line was the biggest question mark. If he's good, like all of a sudden, all right, that's at least one of those spots that's locked down. So that could be huge. And he's a second round pick. So the ability for him to kind of transform his body into this role, to work in this offense, and to play a specific role is super crucial. And also Javon Kinlaw might be a complete monster, and he's still going to get slept on. He's still going to get hated on a little bit just because he did get traded straight up for DeForest Buckner in terms of those picks. Obviously, the Niners were never expecting him to be DeForest Buckner. But if he can be a guy that it's not going to be about the numbers. It's going to be about him commanding double teams and him blowing up the middle so the guys around him are going to produce. And we will be able to see that from a film standpoint, but you might not see it from a number standpoint. And Javon Kinlaw still might be a huge piece for this defense. So I think those are really important guys to bring up as well. Let's talk about Trey Lance a little bit. I feel like Trey Lance, we've always liked talking about Trey Lance. I mean, we were hyping him up in the pre-draft process. I was so excited when he was drafted. I actually popped a bottle of champagne because I remember in December, I was just watching his tape going, dude, if somehow the Niners could get this guy, he is a perfect scheme fit. I loved his tape. Obviously he's super raw, but I'd always think man, this is the perfect guy that you could go after. And then the Niners trade up and go and take him, which I was never expecting to actually happen. It was more of just oh yeah, my dream would be to add Trey Lance to this offense. They do it. Now, Trey Lance comes in rookie year, has the finger injury. He's 21, 22 as a rookie, and he's raw. Of course he's going to be raw. I think someone took his passing attempts, and it was his career passing attempts, high school, college, and NFL so far, are less than Brady's overall passing attempts from last season. So let's keep that in mind when we're evaluating Trey Lance. He's not going to come in and be the Josh Allen that we saw last year, because that's always the comp to Trey Lance. Josh Allen. He's not going to be, the guy that Josh Allen was in year 3 this season. I don't believe so. However, everyone's just been ripping him. He can't do this. His practice completion percentage is under 50%. Guys, his practice completion percentage doesn't matter at all. I'm going to be frank with you guys. They're not running the little handoff. Sorry about the sirens. They're not running the little handoff right down, in the middle, where they're going to flip the ball at Debo and he's going to get credit with the completion. They're not running a lot of screens in practice. What are they doing? They're taking shots downfield. Kyle's not looking at it going, I wonder what Trey Lance's completion percentage is. You know why? Because it's going to go 15 to 20% in a game scenario because he's going to get all of those gimmies. What I've seen from Trey Lance this offseason is a guy whose motion looks way more fluid, who looks really poised, not playing super fast, but he's not playing reckless. He is ahead of schedule, in my opinion, of what I was expecting. I was expecting him to kind of just be air mailing balls a lot, skipping balls in the dirt. But from his preseason tape, and it's not that much. It's not that much preseason tape. When he's missing, he's not missing in a bad way. There was a play where he missed the ball. I forgot who the receiver was. I think it might have been Jawan Jennings. He ran a dig route, and Trey was on the run, and he throws the ball and he skips it in front of him. But he threw it exactly where he was trying to throw the ball. He was trying to throw it low and inside where no defender was getting it because there were 3 defenders closing on him, and he was on the run with a guy on the edge chasing him down. If you're going to miss, that's exactly how you're supposed to miss. That's the other thing. We've seen him hit a couple guys on the outside. You immediately see that shot ability where he hit Danny Gray for the big touchdown. Like, he is way better than I thought he was going to look right now. Does that mean that he's going to turn into a superstar quarterback? No, it doesn't mean that. But in terms of what I was kind of expecting to see from him, in terms of his motion, in terms of that kind of stuff, it's a lot better than what I thought it was going to be. So I'm super pumped with Trey Lance. I think the Trey Lance slander at this point is absolutely ridiculous. I don't understand it at all. I don't get why people are like what they're expecting from him. Like, this is a guy that is so raw, one of the rawest quarterbacks to ever enter the NFL. And we have like the expectation that he's going to come out there just like slicing and dicing every team. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some time. We're going to need to be patient. And even with that said, I still think the Niners are going to be good with him as a starting quarterback this year. So that's where I'm at with Trey Lance. How are you feeling, Aiden?
I'm in the exact same spot you are. As you were talking, I just Googled Patrick Mahomes practice completion percentage, and one of the first links is an article from 2018, right before Mahomes took over. And the title of the article is Patrick Mahomes throws interceptions in every drill, completing less than 50% of his passes in practice. So what are we doing, guys? Come on. If Patrick Mahomes, who during that first year as a starter came out and threw 50 touchdowns, had almost the best first season as a quarterback ever, has that put out about him the year before the off season before he's about to start? Like, Lance doesn't need the bar for Lance is so high, and I don't really understand why. It's so much higher than what Jimmy was last year. It's so much higher than what's reasonable. He doesn't like pull up Josh Allen's first season as a starter. He had more interceptions than touchdowns and barely threw for 2,000 yards. And guess what? Bills made the playoffs. Like, he doesn't need to be that good. I think if Lance throws for 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 10 picks, that's a positive season, and I think the Niners make the playoffs. And the weapons are so good around him. Kyle is such a good play caller. I think we're gonna run the snot out of the ball. I think Debo is going to get more carries than people expect, given that he has all those incentives in his contract. Um, I would just like the Niners are going to be good regardless of whether Trey Lance is good. And he can't be horrible, obviously. But I think as long as he is a capable starter, and it's not like Jimmy was lighting the world on fire. It's not like he's Jordan Love and has to take over for Aaron Rodgers. Like, he just needs to be a serviceable starter. And we talked about this again a little bit before the show. The Niners are in an interesting kind of seesaw where they want to maximize what's left of Trent Williams, but he's really the only dude on this offense who's super who's nearing the end of his career. Everybody else is still ascending. So I would argue that this could be the worst the 49ers offense is over the next 5 to 10 years. As Lance continues to grow, and maybe he busts, maybe he's no good, but to have this expectation of him, he needs to be a Pro Bowler his first year. He needs to throw for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. That's just not realistic. I think, and it's not needed for the Niners to be a playoff team and to be a Super Bowl contender. I think that they're going to run the ball, they're going to play good defense, and they're going to make his job easy. And he's going to have games where he doesn't look awesome, but he's going to make throws. You're going to see flashes where you're like, that guy has it. And to kind of close it out, I was watching the NFL Top 100 kind of reveal show, and Josh Allen, I think was number 13 or something like that. And I think it's Cameron Jordan is talking about Josh Allen, and is like, what you want in the league right now is a big bodied quarterback who can make every throw and who can move. Like, that's what everybody's looking for, and the Niners have that. We need to see if he can put everything together, but he's just as good of a person off the field. which I think will really, really help him. That's honestly Jimmy has two main skills. He's a great guy and he's awesome at QB sneaks. That is pretty much what he does amazing. And by all accounts, Lance is a fantastic guy. He's handled this difficult situation really, really well. Teammates seem to really, really like him. He has a great relationship with Ayuk specifically. Um, I don't think he busts. Maybe he never turns into Josh Allen, but the I think it's a 90% chance that he can be Jimmy Garoppolo. Like that's not a crazy high window. Obviously, they're swinging for the home run, and hope that you get a top five guy at that position. But worst case, I think you hit a double. I think he's a capable starter this year, and just like you said, he's raw, but he doesn't need to be that good this year. I think people it really baffles me, and I don't know if it's because the 49ers have had such good and interesting quarterbacks over the years, or I mean, I think race plays some sort of role in all of this. You see Lamar, Kyler, those guys get slandered a little bit more than some other. Like Herbert is the second coming of Tom Brady, according to some people, but like dude hasn't even made the playoffs yet.
You
Let's
know,
calm down a little bit.
Herbert will be the second coming of Tom Brady, and Lamar Jackson shouldn't even be a starting quarterback at the same time.
Yeah, and Lamar is the one that's an MVP, and Herbert hasn't made the playoffs. I think Herbert's really good. I think he's horribly overrated. Um, but it's so interesting to me, and I'm so excited to watch Lance shut some people up. Which it may not even be this year. Like the 49ers may win in spite of him this year. But I think over the next 5 years, people are going to understand why Kyle gave up that draft capital to go and get him. And we talked about it. We've whiffed on a third and a fourth round running back, but it doesn't matter. We picked up capable guys instead in the undrafted sixth round range. Like as long as you get capable starters every draft, doesn't matter where you get them. You're gonna miss on 50% of your picks anyway. The best GMs miss on 50%. The Patriots draft record is awful. It's so bad, but they're good every year regardless because they find guys that other people discard. So I'm just really excited to watch Trey this year. But people need to tone it down a little bit. Goodness.
Dude, and one of the things you're talking about is you brought up that stat line: 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 10 picks. That's what Josh Allen has in his second year as a starter. And that was a big jump. And then the next, and keep in mind, another big difference too between like the Josh Allen situation and the Trey Lance situation is that Josh Allen didn't have weapons. And then if you throw in like, and then let's look at it like, let's add in Herbert and Mahomes, like as like the best young quarterbacks, right? Of like the guys that people are talking about that I think Trey Lance is going to be different than all these guys. So that's why I don't really love like the comps of everyone. But like for situation, what is his situation most like? It's most like Mahomes in terms of coming in with two legit guys, like in terms of Kittle and Debo, and then in terms of Tyreek and Travis Kelce. And then like, I mean, I think the Niners offense is better because they run the ball more. And they also have Brandon Ayuk. So like I think he's even coming into a better situation there. But let's talk about another guy that gets, so much love that he's going to be like an all-time great. Joe Burrow. He gets all the love in the world, right? And I like Joe Burrow a lot. I think Joe Burrow is a sweet guy. I think a lot of it also is just that Joe Burrow is just cool. That's the other thing. Is like he's awesome. Joe Burrow is also 25 years old. Trey Lance is 22 years old. If Trey Lance is not good for the next 3 years, he's going to get more slander than like anyone ever. But also, like, why wouldn't he be able to make that jump that Joe Burrow did that final year, that 25 season? Or I guess 24 season technically for Joe Burrow. Trey Lance is so much younger than everyone else, where if Trey Lance throws for 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 10 picks, that should be seen as, oh my God, the sky is the limit for this guy. And I feel like the narrative will be, it's not good enough. And it will be him at 22 years old putting up a solid season. They will win a lot of games if he throws for 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 10 picks. I think he's going to do that. I think that is like, I don't want to say the floor, because I guess the floor could be lower, but like a reasonable floor, I should say, like kind of like the median floor, I would put it around there. Like that should be like a decent season for him. I think he can be better than that. I think he can throw for 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 10 picks. That would be phenomenal. That would be absolutely phenomenal. So I think that the pressure is kind of getting a little bit out of hand. I think that he's just a guy like he's 22. He doesn't need to be a superstar this year to turn out to end up being a superstar quarterback in the NFL. So I think you're absolutely right when we're talking about him as like like it's a lot of weird stuff with how people kind of perceive quarterbacks. But I think it's going to be strange with him too, just because of the lack of experience. But I'm super pumped. Final thing I want to bring up with him though is, and this is something that I think that is just really cool to see, is that I talk about how young he is. I'm really fascinated to see what that poise looks like throughout the season. Is he, really smart? Is he making those pre-snap reads? Because you brought up stuff about Jimmy Garoppolo. I think one of Jimmy Garoppolo's best traits is that he was phenomenal at pre-snap reads. He would be able to determine, okay, this linebacker's blitzing. Let's change into this call. Let's check into this. You saw that, Jimmy always goes like that. If Trey Lance is just good at doing that, that's going to mean so much for this team. Like, it's little stuff like that that's probably not going to be able to be seen that well. But Trey Lance is an extremely intelligent person, and if he's able to do those little things, this team is going to win. He doesn't need to play, Patrick Mahomes first year level football. He doesn't need to. But if he's just able to make those small things, to make those reads, to make those pre-snap reads, in the Kyle Shanahan offense, he will find success. So I'm pumped, man. I don't understand why the expectations are even low to begin with. But sky's the limit for Trey Lance, and I think that this year we're going to see him play well. And I don't think it's going to be close to what we see, a couple years down the road when he's actually had experience as a quarterback. He doesn't have that much experience. So I think they're going to rock with him all year, and I'm super pumped to see how it looks. I think that you're right in terms of you talking about the offense. This could be the worst offense, or I guess maybe not the worst offense, just because there are some great players. We don't know how long Trent Williams is going to be there, but for Trey Lance, it might be the worst he looks over the next 5 years, just because he needs to have that year under his belt. But I'm pumped for it. But final topic for today, want to talk about the NFC kind of playoff predictions, a little bit about what the NFC could shape out to be. Because if you look at the NFC compared to the AFC, not even close. The AFC is so much better. And I think that's why we have these high expectations for the 49ers, because you look around the league and you go, okay, who are the top dogs in the NFC? I think you can say the Buccaneers with a lot of confidence. I think, of course, you can say the Rams with a lot of confidence. I think it stops after there. I think those are your tier one teams, and I think you have a bunch of other teams kind of vying for the spots below. And let's not forget to mention the Bucs and the Rams are already dealing with a bunch of injury problems. So like a couple injuries from both those teams, and okay, it looks a lot different, the landscape of the NFC. But Aiden, if you were going to kind of go through all of the NFC teams, who do you think are the playoff contenders? And then who would be like the teams that you are slotting to win each division, and then kind of your wild card teams?
Yeah. I guess I'll just go through each division and talk about each team really, really quickly. I think the Bears are gonna be horrible. I think Fields is in a horrible situation, and he's really been dealt Darnell Mooney as his only real receiver. Horrible offensive line, coaching staff is questionable at best. So I think they're going to be horrible. Lions, I think, will take a step forward. I like Dan Campbell. If you watch Hard Knocks, it's hard not to root for them. I think that they're going to surprise some people. They'll win 7 games. They'll take a step forward, and once they figure out quarterback, that could be a team on the rise. I think the Packers take a bit of a step back, but I think they still win that division. I never want to bet against Aaron Rodgers. He's been throwing to Alan Lazard and Romeo Dubs this offseason, but I think he's still going to pull it off. But I think the Vikings will make the playoffs as a wild card team. I think they'll take a bit of a step forward, and they could win that division over the Packers. But I never want to bet against Aaron Rodgers, so I'd say that the NFC North has 2 playoff teams: the Packers and the Vikings. Cowboys are going to be solid again. They were able to keep both coordinators, which I think was big for them, given that Mike McCarthy is um, not perfect as a head coach. So to keep both the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, I think is important for them. I think they're going to be fine. Giants going to rebuild. I think Saquon's going to have a good year, but the rest of that roster is not awesome. Eagles, Jalen Hurts is another guy who gets slandered, I think, a little bit too much. He had a really good year last year, sort of quietly, but the Eagles are still thinking about moving on. And he's been like exactly who you thought he was. He's improved every year, and he's not perfect, but he's a capable starter. He'll make the playoffs. I could see them as another wild card team, where the Cowboys make the playoffs and the Eagles are a wild card. Um, Commanders, eh. I mean, I think Sam Howell starts for them by probably week 8. I don't think Wentz is fantastic, and Howell looked really good during the preseason. And they have a rough first start to their schedule. So if they start 2-5, you're not going to want to turn the keys over to Heineke. You're going to see what you got in this rookie. So I think that could, I mean, it's for them, it's a sort of see what they got year. But I don't think they're going to be awesome. Falcons, moving on to the NFC South. It just sucks to be the Falcons right now. I can't believe that Ridley got a full year suspension and Watson only gets 11 games. That's ridiculous. But they have a lot of holes. Defense is bad. And Mariota, I guess this is his last opportunity to prove that he's a capable starter, but he's got Desmond Ritter breathing down his neck. A lot of people are high on him. I don't think they're going to be that good. But the NFC South, the other 3 teams, I think are all going to be solid. I think the Panthers are going to surprise some people this year. Um, they have quietly a pretty decent defense. They've been I think they've been a top 10 defense for the past 2-3 years, and with a horrible offense, that's pretty impressive. So if McCaffrey stays healthy, obviously that's a big if. And if Baker just plays solid quarterback play, I could see them sneaking into the playoffs as a wild card team. Um, Saints, I think, are in a very similar boat. Winston needs to show that he can do it, but again, if Michael Thomas is healthy, and I like Chris Olave a lot, they have weapons. Kamara, I don't think he's going to get suspended. It's kind of weird, but I don't think he's going to get suspended. They have a good offense. I don't really know what to expect from Dennis Allen in terms of changes in offensive scheme. Obviously, with Sean Payton gone, that offense is going to change, but their defense was pretty good last year. I think that they'll be solid again. I think that they'll be a tough out. The Bucks, I don't expect the Bucks to be as good this year as they were in the over the past couple years. I think Brady's still going to get his, but they have major question marks up front, in terms of offensive line. They already lost Ryan Jensen for the year, I think, their starting center, who did a ton of stuff for them. I think they let another starter go in free agency to the Bengals. But like they have some question marks up front. And when you have a 45-year-old quarterback, that's not where you want to have question marks. So they'll be solid. They'll make the playoffs, but um, I don't think that they're going to be world beaters like they were over the past couple years. Cardinals moving on to the NFC West. Goodness, I don't know what to say. Like you give Kyler Murray this giant contract, which you kind of had to do, but it just gets blown out of proportion, and you get a ton of backlash about he doesn't study the playbook, and you put a clause in there. It just looks weird. Kingsbury, I don't like at all. I don't think he's a starting, or I don't think that he's a head coach in the league. I think he'd be really good as an OC. Um, but I just don't trust them at all. I think it'll be interesting to see their hard knocks in season portion. And I think Hopkins being suspended for the first 6 weeks is going to hurt them. And they've always been a fast starter and fall apart down the stretch team. But without Hopkins, I think they could start slow and finish slow. So I don't think they're going to be fantastic. But I mean, they have so many weapons. I think they'll win 8-9 games, but I'm not expecting them to really compete for the playoffs. Rams, the Stafford stuff is weird. The shoulder stuff is weird. The elbow, it's just very strange. And if he goes down, they quietly lost a lot of pieces on the offensive line and on the defense. Aaron Donald could be getting suspended for smacking that dude with a helmet in his hand. Again, very strange. So like they are the defending world champions. They beat the Niners in the playoffs last year. So I can't say that the Niners are definitively better, but a lot of weird stuff going on. And if the Bucks and Rams are the two teams that um, were good last year and are good going into this year, they have major question marks. So do the Niners, obviously, quarterback, uh, chief among them, but the rest of the roster is so good, and we're going to run the ball, which I'm so excited for. And to sort of wrap it up, the Seahawks going to be really, really bad. I think them and the Bears are probably the two worst teams in the league. Um, and they have people are going to talk a lot about quarterback and how they don't really have a stable quarterback, but they lost Bobby Wagner, and they still. I think they picked a running back in the second round. I don't really know what you're doing there. Even if Kenneth Walker's a hit, like you're going to put him behind that horrible offensive line that Russell Wilson ran away from for the last 5 years. Um, don't really understand that pick. I guess going best player available, but they're not going to be really any good. And I think Pete Carroll is reaching kind of the end. He's got 2-3 years left, and if they don't hit on a quarterback soon, I could see him leaving, similar to how he did at USC, where he kind of left a mess. I could see him doing that again. So I guess to summarize, Packers, Vikings, Cowboys, Eagles, Panthers, Saints, Bucks, Rams, Niners are sort of your playoff contenders. And there could be major surprises. Obviously, injuries can change a lot, but I'd say that the Panthers are sort of that sleeper team that I think their Vegas win total is 6 games. I could see them winning 10 games. I like the over there, but they obviously need a lot of things to go right. They need McCaffrey to stay healthy, and they need Baker to prove that he's on a bit of a revenge tour. But I'd say that's sort of my NFC takeaways, and the conference is not that good. If the Niners are not a top 3 seed, I would be very, very surprised.
And that would mean that they're winning the division too, which means that'd be big. But yeah, I mean, looking at the overall NFC, I have basically the exact same teams as you do. I don't think I think the only other team that I would kind of add that you didn't mention right now, um, probably the Saints. But then the Saints just traded their left tackle just is out for the season. The rookie left tackle that they were going to kind of bank on. MT's a massive question mark. Kamara's been hurt in the last few years, and we don't know what the offense is going to look like without Sean Payton. And then you go, okay, and then you just trade your top corner to another team that's going to be contending with you probably for a wild card spot. So the Saints are kind of in flux now. It's not good, dude. The NFC is not good. So I went through and I picked my 4 division winners. I have Cowboys, Rams, Vikings, not super confident with that, and Bucks. So I'll go through each division and kind of see like what I'm looking at in terms of like, okay, who can actually like be a contender. I'll start with the NFC East. I have the Cowboys there. Like, I think the Cowboys honestly took a step back this offseason. I think losing Amari Cooper is a bigger deal than most people are letting on. Big time question marks with Gallup there. But I still think they're probably the best team. Don't think they have the best roster. I'll tell you that right now. I think the Eagles have the best roster, and I don't really think it's close. The Eagles have built an absurd team, but they have a limited quarterback. Still, they have an absurd team. They have an absurd roster. So I think the Eagles are a playoff team. I think you have 2 playoff teams here. I would not be surprised at all if the Eagles won the division. I'm just not. And I feel like Jalen Hurts, it's so weird. Like, it's like, oh, like, how good is he? How good? Like, I feel like it's obvious. Like, we know who Jalen Hurts is, and people, like, there's so many, like, question marks and stuff. It's like, look, he doesn't have a lot of arm strength, doesn't have a lot of arm talent. He's a dynamic runner, and he's a smart player. He's conservative with the ball. He doesn't really push it downfield. The big reason why I like them to take a step up, and they made the playoffs last year too, but a big reason I like them to take a big step is that they're legit too deep at defensive line at every single position. Their backup defensive line is probably a starting defensive line on half of the teams in the NFL. It is stupid deep. And then they add Garner Johnson, who was one of the better corners in the league last year. He was awesome for the Saints for nothing. And then they add A.J. Brown. Dude, A.J. Brown, I just brought up like how Jalen Hurts is limited. If you were going to add any wide receiver, it would probably be maybe CeeDee Lamb just because they have the chemistry there. But A.J. Brown running slants across the middle with Jalen Hurts and that run game and that offensive line, it's going to be dangerous. RPO galore right there for that team. I mean, they're going to run that so much. If you're a linebacker, you have your work cut out for you every single week. So, I mean, as a Niner fan, I like the matchup against the Niners, and maybe like the Bucks too. But some of these teams that don't have strong linebackers are going to get shredded by the Eagles. It's going to be tough. So I think you're a little bit limited at quarterback, but I think like you have like the best like guys around him for him to flourish. So I think they are a playoff team. I think you have 2 playoff teams there. And then I'll go to the North. I mean, okay. One other team I'll bring up the Giants and the Commanders real quick. I think the Commanders could be all right. I don't think Sam Howell is going to take over. I will tell you that, Aiden. I think that Wentz is okay, but Wentz could just get hurt. So then there's your option right there where Howell takes over. The Commanders I think they could take a step forward. I don't know if they're quite there. I feel like they're like almost like a team that like they'll be like in the hunt, but I don't know if they'll ever like really be that legit. And then I'm very intrigued to see what the Giants look like because I believe in like what they're kind of building in terms of their coaching staff and stuff. I thought Daniel Jones took a big step last year, but they have all this money in receiver, but the guys can't stay healthy. Kadarius Toney's not been healthy. Kenny Galladay's not been healthy. Like, okay, your offensive line sucks. And then you've lost a lot of your defensive pieces over the past couple of years, where a couple of years ago they had a pretty solid defense. So I'm not super sold on the Giants this year, but I do like them in like maybe like 2 to 3 years. I think they'll be a lot better. So I don't really think those teams are going to be able to make that much of a noise. Maybe the Commanders though. In the North, the Bears are going to suck. I love Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields is going to be a great quarterback in the NFL. Why did the Bears pick him? Did they just not want him to have a good career? They're like, oh, we're going to take you. We're going to give you no offensive line, no weapons. You're going to be in the worst spot of like any quarterback that I can think of in a long time that's been drafted by it. I mean, maybe, I guess, Trevor Lawrence, right? Those are the 2 teams. But I have no idea why they took Justin Fields. They suck. They're terrible. And now they have a guy that I think is a really good quarterback, but we're not going to see him put up numbers. We're not going to see them win games. The Lions will take a step forward, but I don't think they're a playoff team. I think they might like flirt around like 7 wins, 8 wins, something like that. Vikings are stacked. Their defense is old. That's the question mark there. They have some question marks among the offensive line. They have a few guys that are like younger interior offensive linemen that are going to be starting for them. But anytime you have an offense that has, I get that everyone hates Kirk Cousins, but you have a solid quarterback in Kirk Cousins, and it's like, okay, well, who does he have as a supporting cast? Oh, that's right. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and Dalvin Cook. That's as good as it gets in terms of weapons. So I think that they should be able to make some noise. Could they miss the playoffs? Totally, but I think that they're like up there. The Packers roster took a big hit losing Devontae Adams and a couple guys on defense. But I still think that, you have Aaron Rodgers, you're going to be in the mix, and you're going to be playing the Bears twice a year, the Lions twice a year. So that's probably 4 dubs right there. So I don't know. I think that the Packers maybe take a step back, but I still think they're a playoff team. So 2 playoff teams in that division. Then I go to the NFC South, and probably just one. I think the Falcons are actually the worst team in the league. And I will say this. The Falcons should do everything they can to get the number 1 pick to take Bryce Young, because their receivers next year, and I know this is going to be a hot take, next year they may have the best receiving core in the NFL. And I know they're good teams. You have Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Calvin Ridley as your top 3. Calvin Ridley is your 3. That's nuts. So I think that they're in full tank mode. I think they should just suck this year. I don't have faith in Mariota, and especially that defense. The defense is so bad. The Panthers, I think everything you said about the Panthers is accurate. In terms of over-under, absolutely pound the over. Christian McCaffrey has missed a lot of time, but, dude, he's one of the most dynamic players in the league. He's ridiculous. You add Baker Mayfield in there, that's a significant upgrade. You have some adjustments to your coaching staff. Joe Brady last year could not hang in the NFL. That was very clear. So I think you see big steps from them. I don't know if they make the playoffs, but they could be in the mix. And then the Saints, I talked about them a little bit already. Like, it's just, there's a lot of question marks all of a sudden, where heading into the year, I was like, yeah, Saints are number 2 in the division, and they could kind of flirt with the Bucks for the number 1 spot, but it's getting a little bit dicey there. So I want to see what it looked like. What does a roster look like week 6 or week 8? I think that'll kind of give you a better understanding. Because last year they would have made the playoffs over the Niners if Jameis doesn't go down. They would have ran away with it. It wouldn't have been close. So big question marks there. And then the Bucks, it's hard because you look at parts of the roster. It's like, all right, you're gonna have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Julio Jones, and Tom Brady, and Uncle Lenny, right? You got all these stacked guys, and then the offensive line sucks. There's a couple question marks in terms of defensive backs, but I think that they might be the number one seed still. It's just hard with some of the injuries that have kind of started to pile up for them in terms of their offensive line. And then we go to the NFC West. So I'll say one playoff team from that division, but two kind of in the hunt. NFC West, I think you got the Rams and the Niners making the playoffs. I don't know who wins the division. I think that if the Rams were to take a step back, it would be completely because of injury. But I could see it happening because they are thin. They do have question marks. Matthew Stafford has an elbow, like a pitching elbow injury. That is super, super scary for Rams fans. And then the Niners, obviously, you have a first-year starter at quarterback, so that's the big red flag there. Still, those are two of the better overall rosters in the NFC. So I'm having both of them make the playoffs. If the Cardinals can win in December, then yeah, they could be talked about. But until Cliff Kingsbury wins like 2 games after, what is it, week 12, I can't take them seriously. Like, I'm sorry. They had maybe the strangest offseason of any team. Your quarterback has a problem of playing Call of Duty? What? You don't hear that stuff. So I'm going to have to sell their stock, but I also think that their roster got worse. They lost Chandler Jones, who is an amazing pass rusher. I'm just not really sold on the Cardinals anymore. Like, it's been too many years of like, oh, this is their year. This is their year. They're going to be okay. They're going to be good early on in the season, and they're probably going to fall off, and injuries are going to hurt them a lot because they're also quite a bit of an older team. They don't have DeAndre Hopkins for the first 8 games. Like, so not the best. I think they're around a 500 team. That's kind of another team in the hunt. And then you brought the Seahawks. The Seahawks suck. I mean, the Seahawks are going to be terrible. I saw some people saying like, oh, they're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to do this. I don't think we're understanding how big of a difference Russell Wilson makes for your team. That's going to be night and day. Like, I think it's going to be a big wake up call when you win 3 to 4 games this year. And it's like, oh, this team does suck. Russell Wilson is over in Denver winning like 12, 13 games in the best division that I've ever seen in football in the AFC West. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a big wake up call for everyone in Seattle, kind of like, yo, this is really what a bottom out looks like. And Seahawks fans, if you're listening to this, we had the bottom out a couple years ago, so it's going to even out. I mean, it's not like the 49er fans haven't had to deal with that in the Jimmy Tom Sewell years. So I don't know. I think that's where I'm at. I think your playoff teams, I got Cowboys winning the division, Rams winning the division. I'm going to change it. Packers winning the division, Bucks, and then my playoff teams will probably be the Vikings, the Niners, and the Eagles. But there's other teams that can make a run, and the NFC is kind of wide open for a lot of spots. But I think the Niners are super legit. I think if they don't make the playoffs, it's a massive disappointment. Even if Trey Lance looks terrible, I still think they should make the playoffs. But yeah, that's probably all I have. So, Aiden, anything else on the NFC?
No, I think you hit it right on the head. I think 10-7 gets you in. And even if the Niners don't win the division, I think it's pretty clear that they're a top 3 team roster wise at this moment right now, behind the Bucks and Rams, just because we've seen them have success over the past few years. But I mean, you could make a case every team in the NFC has major, major question marks going into this year, and the Niners are one of them. But um, if there's going to be a year to have a first year starter and have question marks at quarterback, this is probably the year. Um, so I mean, we're still waiting for Brady to fall off a cliff. I don't believe it'll ever happen. I guess he's undefeated against Father Time. I'm picking him in fantasy drafts because he's going like the 13th round. Pick him up all day. But yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to be a 49er fan, and say the Niners exceed expectations this year, win 13 games. Like, you could run this conference for the next five years. Like, the Bucks and Rams are both old. Stafford, major question marks around that elbow, and he's what, 35. Brady's 45. This is probably, if not his last year, his last 2 years. And then everybody else, like, there's not another confirmed really good quarterback. Like, Rodgers is old. There's not a good young quarterback that we know is good and in a good situation in this entire conference. So if Lance does pan out, like, you could be looking at the Niners doing similar to what the Chiefs have done over the past couple of years. And I don't even think Lance needs to be that good. So super exciting time, and I just can't wait for Week 1 against the Bears, which hopefully will be a good barometer of how the season goes. Because if somehow we lose to the Bears, I think everything that we just said sort of goes in the tank. So super excited to see it kicked off. Watch Trey and watch us run the damn ball, which I always love to see.
Yeah, I'm there with you, man. And yeah, I'll say this, dude. Week 1 of the NFL is absolutely terrifying because like though there's like five games every year where it's like, how did that team win? Like what? That like if you look at it on paper, you're like, no, there's like that 0% chance the team's gonna win. So no, I'm actually kind of terrified for that. Just like, oh, immediate trap game against the Bears, and the Bears are bad. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But I am pumped for this season. I think the stuff you brought up about the young quarterbacks, dude. Who is it? Who are the young quarterbacks? Hurts, Fields, Kyler. Those are the three. Like those are the three guys. And like I'm not really sold on Hurts, and Fields is in a horrible situation. Kyler, we just talked about the problems that Kyler's had. So like no, it is true. Like there's a lot of positive outlook for the 49ers moving forward. And a lot of these teams are older. And we're gonna see how they play out. But I'm looking forward to it. We only got a few more days till NFL kicks off. So things can do it though for this episode. Really long one. Planning to do probably a little bit longer episode just because we're only gonna be recording one time a week throughout the season. But looking forward to pumping out Niners content and a little bit of NFL content as well. But I think it's gonna do it. So thank you guys all for listening, and we'll be back next week.